This is a quick overview of the backend for my on the Rails Shooter Yukon project. The purpose of this project is to develop a system that another team member could use when creating a level for a on the Rails shooter based game. The idea is to make blueprint actors that other developers can use when building a new level. The way the system works is you would have to place the enemy that you need, which can just be duplicated and replaced with any animations that you would want for your characters and your character's skeletal mesh. Place all your animations in the animations folder after duplicating, along with all the materials, textures you need. If you duplicate it, you'll have the enum actions as well, which ties in with the animation blueprint. There you go. This is a state machine which references the animations enum. Decide what animations play when. The player camera will move along these red splines here that you can just pop right in from the blueprints folder. Manage a spline rails, just pop one right in like any other spline. Just start adding points that you need, determining the path through the level. From there, you would just select this actor in the player camera blueprint so that the player camera will actually move, and for the enemies, you'll just pick from the selected spline reference here. It's an exposed instance editable variable. You can just pick which ones are in the level. The one I just added would be spline rails 18, so you would just change this to the one that you want, and they would hop right over there at runtime, follow that path. These sphere things here are lookup points, so this is another blueprint actor which the player camera references, and at certain points, when the player camera will pass a certain spline point, I have a function where you can set which lookat location they should be staring at. I'll show you in just a minute. A lot of what decides when and where the player is kept within the level blueprint, so it is specific to that level. The enemies are kept within themselves, so they'll find whatever spline reference they have in each level, and they will run along that spline at a certain speed. But for the player, you would have to check the level blueprint, where you tell the player character which spline they need to be following. As you can see, move player 4, spline rails 5. That's when you would swap which spline path mid-level. That how long it will take the player to travel through the spline, since the splines all move on a timeline. As you can see here, the timeline is the alpha, and it will linearly interpolate the player's location along the spline. From the current point at the spline all the way to the end of the spline. Starting point being 0, but if you wanted to start somewhere in the middle, you can just change the point index and decide exactly where the player will be. When the timeline has finished, you would set a new look point, but then also drag off of here and do another custom event where you would move them to the next spline. You can see that over here. There you go. New look point, delay, move player 4. Custom events is just a way of organized it so that you're not running all of this code in one big massive line off the event begin play. Instead, the event begin play goes through the sequence where it collects all of the references it needs by casting them and setting them. And at the very end of the sequence, it will move the player forward. But while it is updating the player location, for example, if the player is halfway through the spline and walking through a door, we want to change what it is the player is looking at. That's where this sequence comes in. So because the sequence is coming off of the timeline's update pin, it will update along with the location of the player throughout the spline length. And coming off of that sequence, we set a new look point. So if we were looking outside, we would now be looking inside. But to check that this isn't just going to jump there and that it is going to look at where we want it to, we can place a branch node and check whether or not the player has passed a certain distance along the spline. Well, a certain spline point. Here we are. Spline point index 5. So if the player has already passed the first spline point, which is 0, which it will do, then it will be looking at this location in the level. So if I move look at 2, then and then hit play, it will change where the player camera is focusing. As you can see, there we go, looking behind us, which is not what I want, so I'll put that back. But there's an example of the modularity in this system. The modularity in this system. And once it passes the 5th point in the index, once it passes the 5th spline point, it will change and look at a new location, making sure that the player is always facing where the developer wants them to and always facing where the action's going to happen. That is pretty much how all of the system works in this little screenshot. Is you create the timeline, possess the player character first and tell them which spline they should be following, and then for each spline you need a timeline that the player will move throughout, so you can decide at what speed along the timeline the player is moving. If you change the playtime variable value, then you will increase or decrease how quickly the player runs through the spline. But regardless, once you do that, you just update until the timeline is finished the player character location with a new value. That value being somewhere along the spline after it's been linearly interpolated. And once the timeline is finished, you move on to the next section of your level with a different spline, while also updating anything that you want the player to look at mid-travel on the update pin. Aside from that, I have the score manager blueprint actor, which the designer just has to place in the level somewhere so that the other blueprints can reference it. This will keep track of the player's score when they shoot an enemy or shoot an item that increases their score, and when the game is saved, This is just a organization thing on the back end. Very simple. Blueprint actor, you just put it in, it gets referenced using the get all actors of class node, or just get actor of class in the player blueprint. Yeah, get all actor of class, score manager, and then set that reference for each of the levels. Aside from that, it's your classic standard character where you would choose whether or not the game is paused when you press the pause button, choose what actions they have. For a on-the-rail shooter, you have whether or not they can shoot. I did add an ammo count, so the player can run out of ammo, and you can set it so that they have to collect an item in the world before they can reload. But for playtesting, it is set to infinite ammo. You just have to press the reload action. There you go. You just have to press the reload action in order to start firing again. I've also left a blueprint where you can place an actor in the level, and when the player shoots it, it can activate something in the world. This little box here is in this building, and this one over here, when the player shoots it, it is set to close this gate. Using a sequence. So that will stop the horde from coming out, but you can change, as a developer using the system, you can change which sequence that is and how the sequence will play out as you wish, and per level, per event that you have going on. And there is a little item corner I've made where it's a crate, and you can place it in the world where you need to, then choose which class will spawn once it is destroyed, once the crate has been broken. There you go. BP pick up ammo and health. So if you pick up a health item, it will increase the number of lives. With the ammo, it will increase the number of bullets in your magazine. This is only relevant if you disable infinite reload, and there's one for score as well. So if you shoot this, it will add points to the player score within Blueprint Score Manager. But you can just duplicate one of these, make a new item of your own, and instead of having to place each new item where you want it, and also to hide what is in it so the player doesn't exactly know, you can just use the pickup spawner, place as many of them wherever you want, make them each spawn a different pickup item, and then when the player is at runtime, it will just spawn all the different pickups upon the player shooting the crates and destroying them.